On March 27th, the General Staff of Ukraine reported large-scale consequences of the strike on the Russian military airfield Engels II, which is located in the Saratov region, more than 600 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. As a result of the attack, 96 air-launched cruise missiles intended for strikes on Ukrainian territory were destroyed. Aviation fuel reserves were also destroyed, which will significantly reduce the operational capabilities of the base. Engels II is one of the most significant Russian air bases. It is from here that strategic bombers take off to strike targets on Ukrainian territory. But what makes this base so important? The fact is that Tu-95 and Tu-160 aircraft capable of carrying nuclear weapons are based here. The airfield also plays a key role in long-range air operations. Then it is one of the main objects of Russian aviation used in the war. A strike on such a base is not just a tactical success for Ukraine. It is a signal that even Russia's strategic facilities are no longer inviolable. But the main question is, how did the Ukrainian armed forces manage to strike a target that is located more than 600 kilometers from the border? There are two main versions. Drone Attack Ukraine actively uses modified Soviet Tu-141 Strij drones. These drones can fly hundreds of kilometers, bypassing air defense systems. Version 2, Sabotage on the territory of Russia. The Ukrainian sabotage group has already carried out a successful operation to eliminate high-ranking General Igor Kirillov. Moscow could not ignore this incident. Russian version of events. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the drones were shot down, but their debris damaged the planes. However, satellite images show damage that is difficult to explain by debris. This strike could be a major turning point in the conflict. Why? Ukraine proves that it is capable of attacking deep into Russia. This undermines confidence in Russian air defense systems. Now the Ukrainian armed forces can strike other strategic targets. Russia will be forced to change strategy. Military aviation may start using other airfields. Control over airspace will be strengthened. International implications. The West may begin to transfer even longer-range missiles to Ukraine. NATO will closely monitor Moscow's reaction. The US and Europe have not yet commented directly on the strike, but in the long term, this event may affect arms supplies to Kyiv. Now the main question is, will this be the beginning of a new phase of the war? There are several scenarios. Escalation. Russia may intensify strikes on Ukrainian territory. A strike on decision-making centers in Kyiv is possible. Ukraine's counterattacks. The Ukrainian armed forces will continue to attack strategic Russian facilities. New attacks on airfields and military warehouses are possible. Diplomatic consequences. Russia may increase pressure on the West, demanding that it stop supporting Kyiv. But the US and EU will most likely respond by increasing arms supplies. This conflict has already gone beyond the scope of a conventional war. It has moved into the realm of strategic strikes, which could change the balance of power. Will this strike be a turning point? Will it have an impact on the future of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict? There are more questions than answers at the moment. But one thing is clear, the war has changed and now no one can feel safe. Write in the comments what you think about this strike and its consequences. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and follow the most important events in world politics. See you in the next episode.
And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America.
Imagine this. US President Donald Trump says he wants to buy Greenland. Yes, this is not a joke. Denmark responded with a firm refusal. Why is the US president so keen on the idea of annexing Greenland? What did he want to do there? And most importantly, why did the Danes refuse so categorically? Let's dive into the political intrigues, economic benefits, and strategic goals of world powers in the fight for one of the most underestimated regions of the planet. First of all, what is so special about Greenland? It is the largest island in the world, but that is not its main attraction. First, minerals. Greenland has huge reserves of oil, gas, uranium, rare earth metals, and other resources that could bring colossal profits in the future. In the context of global economic rivalry, such resources are worth their weight in gold. Secondly, geopolitical influence. Look at the map. Greenland is strategically located. It connects Europe and North America, and also gives control over the Arctic region, where melting ice is opening up new sea routes. Whoever controls Greenland controls the Arctic. The United States has long had a presence in Greenland through Thule Air Base, a key element of the North American nuclear early warning system. If the United States were to gain full control of Greenland, it could significantly increase its military influence in the region. What is Trump up to? Now let's figure out why Trump needed Greenland. Version 1. Economic benefit. Trump is a businessman. He sees the world through the prism of deals. He literally offered Denmark a profitable deal to sell Greenland to the US for a certain amount. This would allow the states to monopolize the extraction of rare earth metals and oil in this region. Version 2. Control over the Arctic. Trump understood that Russia and China were actively increasing their influence in the Arctic. Russia was developing military bases, and China was increasing investments in mineral extraction. The United States could not afford to remain on the sidelines. Version 3. Political PR. Some analysts believe that Trump simply wanted to put on a show. His statements about buying Greenland caused a huge resonance in the media, and for him it was a way to distract attention from the internal problems of the United States. Why did Denmark turn down Trump? Denmark reacted to Trump's proposal with surprise, and then with indignation. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the idea absurd and said Greenland was not for sale, infuriating Trump, who even cancelled a planned visit to Copenhagen. The thing is, Greenland has a lot of autonomy. It has its own government, and the Greenlanders themselves decide what to do with their future, and they weren't going to be part of the United States. If Denmark had made the deal, it could have jeopardized its credibility in the world. Selling the territory to the US would have looked like a renunciation of national sovereignty. It turns out that Denmark did everything to maintain control over the island, despite pressure from the US. Who really benefits from this situation? Who really benefits from this conflict? The United States. Even despite the refusal, Trump achieved the effect. The Greenland issue began to be discussed on the international arena, and the United States continued to strengthen its military presence in the region. Russia. The growing American influence in the Arctic worries Moscow. Russia has long been developing military infrastructure there, and Trump has given it a reason to step up its efforts. China. Beijing is also interested in Greenland. Chinese companies are actively investing in mining operations on the island, which worries both Denmark and the United States. What will happen next? The US will not abandon the idea of increasing its influence in the Arctic. The Greenland issue remains open, and the struggle for it is just beginning. Could the US try to buy Greenland again? Could China gain more influence there? How will Russia react to the militarization of the Arctic? Write in the comments what you think about Trump's attempt to buy Greenland. Was it a genius strategy or another absurd move? Subscribe to the channel, like it, and see you in the next episode.
First of all, for the Canadians, and we have many dear friends in Canada, and of course we love the Canadian people, but the Canadian leadership threatening retaliatory tariffs against the United States, as President Trump often says, they just don't have the cards. There is no way that Canada...
I'm sure you've noticed America's place in the world is kind of upside down right now. Donald Trump berated Ukraine's president in the Oval Office on Friday. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev tweeted that he loved seeing, quote, the insolent pig finally get a proper slapdown in the Oval Office.
Today we witnessed one of the world's most innovative companies come under attack. Tesla, a symbol of advanced technology, the future of the auto industry, a company that changed the idea of transportation, suddenly found itself unpopular with the global elites. But what happened? Why did Canada, always considered a loyal ally of the US, suddenly announce a ban on Tesla in its electric car support program? Is this a simple policy, a random decision, or part of a global game where Musk is to be thrown out of the race? And what's even more interesting is why this news scared Donald Trump so much. It would seem that the former US president has nothing to do with it. But if we dig deeper, we will see that we are talking about something much bigger than just a refusal of subsidies. We are talking about the redistribution of the world market, the struggle for power over future technologies, and even about hidden levers of pressure on politicians. Today, we will analyze all the details of this scandal and try to understand whether this is really a blow to Tesla or whether Elon Musk is just another victim of a global system that does not tolerate competitors. Donald Trump has always been a supporter of tough economic policies. He imposed tariffs, protected American business, and opposed foreign interference in the US market. But now he finds himself in a strange situation. Canada, which has always supported economic cooperation with America, is suddenly taking a step that can be called hostile? Previously, Canadians could count on significant subsidies from the government when buying an electric car. This was done in order to speed up the transition to green transport and reduce dependence on gasoline engines. However, now Tesla suddenly finds itself out of the game, while other automakers such as Volkswagen, Ford, and General Motors remain on the list. What conclusion can be drawn? It's simple. Canada has made it clear that Tesla is no longer a priority company. They are trying to squeeze it out of the market to clear the way for their own manufacturers. But why is Trump panicking? The fact is that such a decision by Canada could be an alarming signal for other countries. If an ally of the US is capable of taking such steps, then who is next? The EU? China? Could this be the beginning of an international economic war where Tesla will be isolated? When such things happen, the main question is always the same: who benefits from it? The Canadian government says Tesla allegedly doesn't meet its environmental standards. But let's be honest, how did the company that made electric cars a mass product suddenly stop being green? This argument simply does not hold water. But if you look at who is left on the list of the subsidy program, everything falls into place. Volkswagen, Ford, and General Motors are still on it. 3 companies that are competitors of Tesla. The big auto giants have always been wary of Tesla. Musk's company entered the market too quickly and turned it upside down. The auto industry has been controlled for decades by the largest corporations that were not ready for such a drastic change in the rules of the game, and now they have found a way to hit Tesla using state mechanisms. Elon Musk has always been a man who does not fit into the system. He is not afraid to criticize governments, is not shy about expressing his opinion on global issues, and even directly challenges the elites. Remember his statements about Twitter, about Biden, about the war in Ukraine. Musk does not play by the rules of global corporations, he makes his own rules. And now his business is under attack. Accident. Or is it a warning? Perhaps Musk is being told that he has gone too far, that he is too independent, too powerful, and too inconvenient for the elite. This is not just an economic blow, it is an attempt to assist. Now, Tesla is not just a company, it is a symbol of American innovation leadership. If it loses support in key markets, it is not only a blow to Musk, but also a serious challenge to the entire US economy. Now think about it, if Canada takes such a seat. After all, if the global elites decided to shut down Tesla, they can do it systematically at the level of international politics. This is no longer just business. This is a war for the future of technology. And this is an alarming sign for everyone too. We see one of the world's most advanced companies falling victim to the shadowy games of the elite. Tesla is being forced out of the market using government regulation mechanisms. Canada was the first step in this attack. Who is next? But the question, will Tesla survive, or will we witness the end of the Musk era? There are no answers yet, but one thing is for sure, this war is just beginning. What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments. Share this video, like and subscribe so you don't miss. Did Trump think Canada would simply give in? Wrong. When Washington imposed tariffs, Ottawa not only responded with mirror measures, but also went further. Now a key U.S. artery is under threat: access to Alaska. How did we get to this point? Can Canada really cut off Alaska? And how will the White House react? Let's find out. It all started with the Trump administration's imposition of 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. The official reason? National security. But in reality, it was the latest in a series of economic standoffs.
Front facing the Detroit skyline.
Trump is not making America great. He's making America hate. We love Americans. Dump Trump.
It's a message not just about
Canada didn't take it lying down and announced retaliatory tariffs worth $155 billion, hitting American products including cars, food, and energy. Alaska is one of the most isolated states in the United States. The only land route from Alaska to the continental United States is through Canada, specifically British Columbia and the Yukon. If Canada decides to restrict this route, the consequences will be catastrophic. Food and fuel supply disruptions. Alaska imports most of its food. Economic damage. Roads that pass through Canada are vital for trade. Energy impact. Even oil and gas supplies could be at risk. Canadian authorities have already begun to act. New duties on American trucks. Now shipping goods to Alaska has become more expensive. Tighter controls at the border. Checks have become longer. Delays on the roads have increased. Restricted access to Canadian electricity. Ontario threatens to raise tariffs on electricity exports to the United States. The U.S. has already begun to feel the consequences. Down-arrow automotive companies, Ford, Tesla, GM, are losing the Canadian market. Farmers in the U.S. are losing a key buyer, Canada. Oil and gas prices could rise sharply. Senators from Alaska are already demanding Washington's intervention, but will the U.S. have enough leverage? If the conflict escalates, Canada may take even more drastic measures. Closing roads and railways, the only route to Alaska will be blocked. Restricting maritime supplies, ships will be forced to choose expensive and difficult routes. Restricting airspace, this will hit military and commercial shipping. Possible outcomes of the conflict. 1. Negotiations and compromise. The U.S. and Canada find a way out and cancel tariffs. 2. Escalation and continuation of the trade war. The situation gets out of control, which leads to new sanctions. 3. A complete breakdown in relations. Canada turns to Asia and Europe, and the U.S. loses a reliable partner. The conflict between the U.S. and Canada could become one of the largest economic wars of our time. Will a compromise be found, or will we see a split between the two largest economies in North America? Write in the comments, how far can Canada go? Can the U.S. retreat without losing face? What future awaits Alaska? What's going on with Tesla? Why is the company that once set trends in the automotive industry now facing colossal problems? How are the US, EU, and Canada involved? And most importantly, what could this crisis mean for the global economy and ordinary consumers? All this right now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like. This will help promote the video. So let's figure it out. Why is Tesla, one of the leaders in the electric car market, facing such problems? The answer is simple. Trade wars that began under Donald Trump and are now threatening to reach a new level. Back in 2018, Trump imposed tough tariffs on imported goods in an attempt to protect American manufacturers. But what did this lead to? First, many countries responded with mirror measures, which hit American companies, including Tesla. Second, the logistics and production chains that had been built between the US, Canada, China, and Europe for decades began to collapse. Secondly, the logistics and production chains that had been built between the US, Canada, China, and Europe for decades began to collapse. As a result, Tesla faced a serious drop in sales in Europe and Canada as cars became more expensive due to new tariffs. But this is just the beginning. Now the question is, how did the EU and Canada react? They didn't stand aside. The EU increased the duties on American cars, including Tesla. Now European buyers are forced to pay much more for American electric cars. Canada also responded with its own measures. In response to the U.S. tariffs, it imposed additional taxes on American goods, including electronics and cars. As a result, the Tesla market in these regions has sharply contracted. Sales of Tesla Model 3 and Model Y in Europe fell by 30%, and in Canada by 25%. But why did this cause such a reaction from Elon Musk? Musk himself has repeatedly criticized the U.S. tariff policy. He stated that such restrictions do not help American industry, but on the contrary, harm it. Risks for Tesla factories. Factories in Germany and China are now at risk of reducing production due to export problems. Tesla shares have already started to fall. Investors are worried and Musk is looking for a way out of the crisis. But is there a way out? The question on everyone's mind, will the U.S. lift its tariffs to save Tesla and other companies? On the one hand, the Biden administration understands that trade wars are bad for the economy. There is talk in the White House about reconsidering the tariffs imposed under Trump. On the other hand, American automakers like Ford and GM don't want competition from European and Chinese electric cars. This makes the situation extremely difficult. If the U.S. lifts tariffs, it may help Tesla, but it will hurt traditional American auto giants. So no decision has been made yet, but pressure from business is growing. What's the forecast for the future? If the tariffs remain, Tesla will continue to lose markets in the EU and Canada. If the U.S. revises its tariff policy, Musk could return Tesla to the top, but this will cause new disputes in the American industry. What do you think? Write in the comments, should the U.S. cancel tariffs, or is this the right way to protect the national economy? Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the bell so you don't miss new releases. Thank you for being with us. What if your closest trading partner suddenly says, "Enough! The United States is used to dictating terms to Latin America, but now everything is changing." Mexico, Washington's main economic ally to the south, has struck back, imposing tough tariffs, ending joint economic programs, and making increasingly strident statements from the country's political leaders. What is behind this decision? Why does Mexico no longer want to play by the U.S. rules? And how will Washington respond? Let's find out. It all started when the Trump administration announced new trade tariffs. The White House argued that it was protecting the American economy, but Mexico saw it as a direct threat to its interests. Tariffs hit key sectors: 25% duties on Mexican steel and aluminum, curbs on imports of cars and auto parts, new taxes on agricultural products. Mexico, of course, has not stood aside. In response, it has imposed mirror tariffs worth $30 billion, affecting products from the United States: corn, pork, cars, and petrochemicals. The U.S. hoped that Mexico would relent, but were they wrong? The new administration in Mexico City has decided that it is time to defend national interests. The Mexican president declared, "What steps has Mexico taken? Strengthening economic cooperation with China, Beijing has offered to replace American investments in energy. Expanding trade with Europe, the EU is interested in Mexican agriculture and raw materials. Reducing dependence on American goods, the government has launched active programs to support the domestic market. Who will suffer more, the United States or Mexico? Washington has grown accustomed to considering Latin America its backyard. But can the U.S. survive a trade war without losing billions? Losses for the U.S. The largest car companies, Ford, Tesla, GM, depend on Mexican parts. Farmers in the U.S. are losing the Mexican market, one of the main buyers of American corn. The production of electronics and household appliances in the U.S. is also under attack. Many components are made in Mexico. Who will survive this standoff longer? The U.S., which has more money, or Mexico, which has more resources and allies? Political impact. Can Trump win this game? Donald Trump positions himself as a tough negotiator, but he may have trapped the United States himself. Consequences for Trump. American businesses are already demanding tariffs be revised. Farmers are threatening to protest. Political rivals are using the situation against him in the upcoming elections. And what about Mexico? The country's president enjoys enormous popular support. Many see his actions as a long-awaited step toward liberation from economic dependence. Provocative question: can Mexico become an example for other countries tired of American hegemony? Mexico has taken an unprecedented step by challenging the United States. Will this be just an episode in the eternal economic confrontation, or the beginning of a new era where Latin America ceases to be dependent on the United States? Write in the comments, will Mexico be able to withstand this fight? What countermeasures will the United States take? Could this escalate into a larger conflict? Subscribe to the channel, like and watch new releases. The world of politics is changing right before our eyes. The war in Ukraine has been going on for 3 years, or 1,122 days, and during this time, many terrible things have happened that any war brings. Both sides of the conflict have already suffered heavy losses and are exhausted by the trench warfare. The Ukrainian economy suffers from constant shelling of infrastructure and energy, but thanks to help from Europe and the US, it is still staying afloat. Russia is bogged down in an attack, and their economy is also not in the best shape due to sanctions. Unfortunately, there are no open negotiations between Russia and Ukraine yet. But let's look at the consequences of the long-awaited peace treaty in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict in this video. For Ukraine, a peace agreement would mean an end to hostilities, which would allow for large-scale reconstruction of destroyed infrastructure. According to various estimates, hundreds of billions of dollars may be needed to restore Ukraine. However, the question remains, who will finance this process? Western countries and international organizations, the EU, the US, the World Bank, and the IMF, can provide funds for Ukraine's recovery. However, serious reforms and concessions may be required in return. Reparations from Russia. If a peace treaty with certain conditions is signed, Russia may be obliged to compensate for the damage, but it is unlikely that Moscow will agree to such conditions without serious concessions from Ukraine. Private investment. Ukraine can attract international companies to help restore its economy by providing favorable conditions for investors. The domestic political situation in Ukraine will also depend on the terms of peace. If the agreement requires territorial concessions, this could cause discontent in society. History knows examples of such decisions. For example, the Munich Agreement of 1938, when concessions were made for the sake of peace, but this led to new conflicts. Several scenarios may arise. Political stabilization. If the peace conditions are acceptable, Ukrainian society may unite around the idea of restoring the country. Political crisis. In the event of controversial decisions, the country may experience division, protests, and a change of power. Strengthening of radical movements. Part of society may disagree with the world, which will lead to the activity of radical organizations. For Russia, a peace agreement could mean a partial lifting of sanctions, which would help restore economic ties. However, it is important to understand that the West may not agree to a complete lifting of restrictions, since the sanctions policy remains an instrument of pressure. Partial lifting of sanctions. If Russia agrees to a compromise, some sanctions could be lifted, especially in the energy sector. Maintaining the sanctions regime, even after the signing of peace, the West may continue the sanctions policy in order to weaken Russia. Turn to the East. Russia may finally strengthen ties with China, India, and other countries, minimizing the influence of the West. As with Ukraine, there could be political repercussions within Russia. If the peace is perceived as a defeat, it could lead to growing discontent among elites and society. However, if the agreement is favorable to Moscow, the Russian leadership could strengthen its position. Europe has been one of the hardest hit parties in the conflict, as sanctions and the energy crisis have hit the economy. Signing a peace deal could ease the situation, but not entirely. Lower energy prices. Europe could once again receive gas and oil from Russia, which would help reduce inflation. Increased military spending. Even after peace, EU countries may increase military budgets, fearing new conflicts. Political instability. Some EU countries may demand a revision of the sanctions policy, which will lead to disagreements within the bloc. Control over the restoration of Ukraine. American companies can receive lucrative contracts for the restoration of infrastructure. Arms contracts. Even after the war, NATO and Ukraine will continue to purchase weapons, which is beneficial for the American military-industrial complex. Energy influence. Europe has already reoriented itself towards American LNG, and the US will seek to maintain this dependence. A peace deal between Ukraine and Russia would dramatically change the global political landscape. While Ukraine and Russia would face internal challenges, the United States would likely emerge as the winner, gaining additional leverage. However, the question of how long-term this peace will be remains open. History shows that even after agreements are signed, conflicts can continue in a latent form. Perhaps peace between Ukraine and Russia will not be the end of the confrontation, but only a new phase in the struggle for influence. Subscribe.
We have some breaking news coming in. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau speaking right now after the U.S. slapped Canada with...
We are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes.
We engaged closely and constructively with the President and his...
Relations between Canada and the United States, which have been built on a strong economic partnership for many years, are now being seriously tested. In response to the Donald Trump administration's 25% tariffs on steel and auto imports, Ottawa responded with symmetrical measures, imposing similar tariffs on U.S. goods worth a total of $155 billion. The trade dispute between the two countries began after Washington announced the introduction of protective tariffs on a number of Canadian goods, citing national security concerns. Canada did not wait long and announced the first stage of retaliatory measures, a 25% tariff on imports of American products worth 30 billion Canadian dollars. Now, if the situation does not change, a second round of sanctions will be introduced within the next 3 weeks, this time for $125 billion. But what exactly will be affected by these new tariffs? This time, the largest American industries are hit: automotive industry, including Tesla, Ford, and GM, energy sector, oil, gas, electricity, metallurgy, steel, and aluminum. This trade conflict is hurting not only corporations, but also ordinary citizens. Higher tariffs mean higher prices, fewer jobs, and potentially less investment. For example, U.S. car manufacturing is heavily tied to Canadian supplies. Parts used to assemble cars cross the border several times before reaching the market. New tariffs make production more expensive, which will inevitably affect the cost of the final product. What is the position of the new Canadian Prime Minister? The recent change of power in Canada has brought new nuances to the negotiating process. The new Prime Minister Mark Carney has made it clear that he does not intend to make concessions without reciprocal steps from Washington. Moreover, he emphasized that Canada is no longer going to negotiate from a position of weakness. What are the implications for American companies? Major automakers like Ford and GM could see their sales in Canada plummet. Tesla will also be under pressure. The Canadian market is an important sales point for the company, and new tariffs will make cars significantly more expensive. In addition, Ontario took an unexpected retaliatory step, a 25% tax on electricity exports to the United States. Ontario Premier Doug Ford even threatened to block supplies entirely if the situation escalated. This caused serious concern in the White House, since electricity from Canada plays a key role in the energy supply of several American states.
Ford is focused on Donald Trump.
Canada will never be the 51st state. Canada is not for sale.
The escalating trade war has already begun to impact financial markets. The Canadian dollar has weakened, stock indices are falling, and the Bank of Canada has warned that further conflict could reduce the country's GDP by 3% over the next 2 years. To reduce its dependence on the American market, Ottawa is actively expanding trade ties with other countries, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. Under the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, Canada is already strengthening cooperation with Japan, Australia, and Vietnam. In addition, the Carney government is launching a number of measures to support national businesses.
To do. We two friends fighting is exactly what our opponents around the world want to see.
How will the situation develop? The question remains open. Either the U.S. and Canada will reach a compromise, or the trade war will escalate into a protracted conflict that will harm both sides. Do you think Canada will be able to withstand the pressure from the U.S., or will it give in to this confrontation? Share your opinion in the comments.